Hello and welcome back. Today I want to do part of my January wrap-up. Today I'm going to be covering everything that isn't horror. So that's going to include science fiction, fantasy, and a whole swack of graphic novels. I read a ton this month. I have a lot of recommendations, so let's jump in. Starting with science fiction, I read Fledgling by Octavia Butler, and this is a story about a young woman who wakes up without her memories. She does not know who she is, but she has this strange craving for blood, and it soon becomes apparent that she is a vampire. I really enjoyed this one. This, as I mentioned, is a science fiction story, and the reason it's considered science fiction is that the vampires in this world are a separate species. They're possibly considered to be aliens, and the main character is a genetically engineered vampire that has the ability to walk in the daylight because she has darker skin. This is my first time reading Octavia Butler, and I was so impressed. Her writing is very sparse, which may not work for everyone, but it's personally a style that I really like. And it was just a really gripping story. I've read quite a few vampire books at this point, and it was really refreshing to get a bit of a different take and have that science fiction angle. And I am definitely going to check out more of her books. So if you do have recommendations of what I should read of her next, I'd love to know. I believe Kindred is her most popular book, but you know my reading taste, so I'd love to know if I should read that one or something else from her collection. I also read Nemesis by Alex Lamb, which is the second book in a space opera trilogy called The Roboteer. And this entire series follows a future where humans have expanded beyond Earth and are now living on other planets. In the first book, there is a conflict between the traditionalists that are still living on Earth and those that live elsewhere. And the book particularly follows a couple of different perspectives, including people who are called Roboteers. They have the ability to connect directly with technology due to their implants, and I really like the technology in this one. It had some really imaginative ideas. I would say that the sequel is actually stronger than the first book. It has better writing, more character development, and was just a little bit stronger overall. So I definitely do plan on finishing this trilogy. However, I should say this is not the strongest series I've ever read, but if you're like me, love space opera and are just looking for more, this is a fun one to pick up. So if you're just in the mood for something fun, light, I would recommend this one. Last science fiction I read this month was Parasite by Mira, which of course is a pen name for Sean McGuire. This is a book set in a future where people are able to have tapeworms put into their body in order to manage all of their medical functions. This is all done through a corporation called Symbiogen. And as you may expect, while this seems like a wonderful idea, they soon realize that things may not be so perfect. The corporation may have alternative motives, and things start to go wrong when people with the tapeworms start to exhibit certain strange behavior. And this book is science fiction with just a very light touch of horror, as with pretty much all of Mira Grant's books. And I admit I was actually pretty disappointed by this one. I have loved her other books, but this one was very, very predictable. I found myself quite bored with the plot because I knew exactly what was going to happen, and there was no twists or turns that I didn't see coming from a mile away. The characters were unfortunately really flat and forgettable, which is surprising because Mira Grant is usually known for writing really strong characters. So I wouldn't personally recommend this book. I do really like Mira Grant's books otherwise, so if you are interested in checking her out, I would personally recommend either reading Feed or Into the Drowning Deep, which I thought were both fantastic science fiction books with, again, just a little bit of horror snuck in there. Now, I want to talk fantasy, and I've said before that I'm not a big fantasy reader, but this month I ended up finding two books that I absolutely loved and would definitely recommend. Now, the first one is Kings of the Wyld by Eames, and this is about a group of mercenaries that back in their day, they were epic adventurers. They went and did these incredible things and were renowned and basically treated like rock stars. They are now older, however, they are past their prime, they have retired and are now living fairly ordinary lives. However, one of the men approaches the group to get back together to do one last quest because he needs to rescue his daughter. And the story takes off from there. This book is so much fun. It's very lighthearted. While it has a bit of an epic adventure to it, it's not a book you want to take too seriously. Instead, the book is really very tongue-in-cheek about a lot of the classic tropes of the heroes, playing with the idea that the guys are now past their prime and are a little bit older, a little bit slower, and it's really funny. I normally don't like funny books, but this one worked for me. And I would probably recommend this book more to people who do regularly read fantasy. I don't read tons of fantasy, but I do play Dungeons and Dragons, and because of that, this book really worked well for me personally, because this book read like one big goofy Dungeons and Dragons adventure. So if it is one you're thinking about picking up or it sounds like a lot of fun, I do recommend it. I thought it was a great debut novel, and I look forward to reading the next one in the series, which is supposed to be a little bit more about some female adventurers and just sounds like a lot of fun too. Now, the other fantasy book I read this month was The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson, which is the first book in the Mistborn trilogy. Now, this is a booktube favorite, so I probably don't need to say a lot about it, but I did not expect to like this book this much. I have heard so much about it online and have put it on my TBR and off my TBR forever. I just didn't know if it was going to be for me. I kind of get nervous when a book gets this hyped, but I ended up loving it. Honestly, it was my favorite book I read this month, and I became so obsessed. The story is so immersive. The plot revolves around a group of rebels that are trying to overthrow an evil lord that has reigned over a land for 1,000 years. The magic system is really cool, and as someone who doesn't read as much fantasy, I'll let you know that the world building is so accessible. Brandon Sanderson literally spells everything out on the page, so if you're ever someone who is confused and a little bit intimidated by fantasy books, particularly adult fantasy, this is a super easy one to get into. You will understand everything. And if anything, I almost recommend this book more to fantasy newbies. I think people who read tons of the genre might be a little bit underwhelmed by this one, but again, as a gateway into fantasy, I think this one is brilliant. It was just so easy to fall into. And I just love the story. I love the underdogs fighting against the evil empire. It actually gave me Star Wars vibes. I got very attached to the characters, which I didn't expect. I particularly loved the villain, who was just about perfect for me. I thought he was just fantastic. And you know me, I'm always cheering for the villains. But overall, I do recommend it. I will definitely continue on with the series, and I would love to know if you've read it as well. Please gush in the comments, because I'm really, really obsessed with this one, if you can't tell. Finally, I want to talk graphic novels, and I read volumes 3 through 7 of What Did You Eat Yesterday? This is a super cute manga series I started last year about a couple of gay gentlemen who love to cook, love to eat, and really enjoy living frugally. It's much cuter than the stories I normally read, but I've just been binging through the manga all month and will probably finish it up next month because I just love this one a lot. The other graphic novel I read this month was Afar by Leila del Duca, and this is a story about a young woman who, when she falls asleep, has the ability to dream and possibly get transported to other worlds. It's this really interesting mix of science fiction and also has a lot of influence from both African and Arabic traditions. The diversity in this one is fantastic. Unfortunately, the plot was very lacking. It had a really interesting idea. I thought the world building was creative. I loved to see the world she was transported to, but the ending was so unsatisfying. It was just not complete, which would be fine if it was a series, but this book is considered to be a standalone. So for that reason, I was pretty disappointed by it because it just didn't really do enough if that's the entire story. So I don't really recommend that one, unfortunately. So that is everything I read in the month of January. I'd love to know if you're planning on picking up any of the books I mentioned today. Please leave a comment down below and follow me on social media. All the links are in the description box, and I will talk to you again soon in another video. Okay, bye.